With that, I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Jennifer Jackson. She's a clinical engineer based in the United States and is the Director of Connectivity at the Masimo Corporation. She has quite an extensive resume, so I'll let her share a little bit more with you.
Well, thank you, Jen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Carla, for such a great presentation. It's definitely hard to follow such an impressive discussion that you started. So I was invited to share with you some of my own experiences and talk a little bit about the role of clinical engineering when it comes to creating or enabling medical device solutions. So as Carla introduced the concept of working with startups, trying to identify what we call it the white space or that opportunity and how to rapidly innovate to meet some really engaging needs with patient care today. My role is to take a lot of those concepts and pull them over into design and the creation of some of the technology that would then find its way to the patient's bedside, whether that patient is in the traditional four walls of a hospital or a clinic, or as Carla mentioned, at home or in different areas, as we really are seeing that the place, the geography where healthcare is being delivered is changing. So yeah, a little bit about me. I am a fellow with the American College of Clinical Engineering. I've been extensively engaged with that organization for the majority of my clinical engineering career. I am still at Masimo Corporation. My role there is Director of Connectivity, though I am changing soon to expand my role to get more involved with strategic initiatives. Masimo is constantly expanding our portfolio of technology and the market segments that we will be going into. And so I've been asked to take on some of that work and help identify what the opportunities are, help to refine some of those ideas. And a lot of that is because of my clinical engineering background. I'm probably one of the few at the organization that clearly understands how to take all of the clinical needs, and it's not just the nursing and it's not just the physician, but it's a lot of how the different pieces of healthcare work when it comes to the supplies and the legal risk management ramifications and the patient experience and all of those things that we do on a day-to-day basis. Most corporate organizations are still struggling to put the pieces together. So, my boss wanted me to get more involved because he recognized that I was one of the few that could lend a voice and do proper reviews of some of our technology as we're getting ready to launch it into the field. And I was very flattered by that, but at the same time, I recognized that, some of my talents really have come to fruition, and I can really still continue to make myself useful as a clinical engineer to healthcare. And some of that is just, extensive experience in hospital settings, whether it has been in the United States or abroad, with a short stint in Rome, Italy. Before then, I did software development, and I think some of that also has helped with my career. But for the most part, my career has been clinical engineering. Next slide, please. And I wanted to open up with a quote. Marie Curie has always been such a role model for me in this notion of, sort of take the path that's not yet been charted. When I was moving into clinical engineering, it was a relatively unknown field. Biomedical engineering in the United States was still relatively new, yet it felt right. And it was worth taking that risk for me because it was something that I believed in. And I would encourage all on the call to really follow your passion and really try to continue to do what you love, because it may not pay the most, but it's so rewarding at the end of the day. And for me, and I think I've been working long enough with family and with others there's nothing better than having a rewarding career because of everything that you can bring to it. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the concepts that I do bring, and I would encourage you to include some of these, whether you work for industry, for a medical device manufacturer, for a Ministry of Health, for a hospital setting. They sound very simple, but believe me, and I think some of you might agree, it's really very difficult, I think, to bring some of these ideas continuously and continue to draw out some of the answers with every solution. Whether it's a startup or it's a legacy solution, one must continue to ask that question. What is the clinical requirement? What is needed today? Maybe what we installed 15 years ago no longer meets our needs. What is that need in about 5 to 10 years? And there are many out there that will write articles about what the future trends might be. There are others that keep it to themselves, but I think through conversations with peers, it's not that difficult to at least identify where the investment of capital can go for that next 5 to 10 years to meet some of the clinical requirements. And there's always that question about, okay, who is going to be involved? Who are going to be making these decisions when it comes to investing in the technology? Who will be writing the purchase order? At the same time, who are going to be the end users? What influence have they had with any of these decisions? Because I think many of us know that if the end user doesn't want to use your technology, and that can be the patient or the nurse, if they're not going to use the technology, then the investment's not worth it. Is a technology solution readily available today? And this is where there is a lot of synergy between what I currently do, what Carla is doing, in that a lot of our clinicians, a lot of our stakeholders recognize that certain technical solutions may not be available today. And so the important thing is to understand what will work today and what is needed in order to perhaps reach that clinical requirement tomorrow. I will share with you, there are a lot, because I've been talking to a lot of them, there are a lot of remote patient monitoring companies out there today. They started during the COVID pandemic. Some of them will survive, some of them will not. And the reason why those that will survive will be successful is because they accurately were able to create a solution that can change and be configured as the clinical requirements change. And again, what is that timeline for that? So anytime a new innovation is being brought forth, there has to be that question about, will the technology, again, address all of the issues today, and what might the timeline be given certain requirements that are coming down the pipeline? We work with many different ministries of health, and what they're asking for today cannot be met. So we have the opportunity to say, again, to meet your clinical requirements, this is what we have to provide to you. Let's talk about a way that we can grow together with your input and with our technical innovation to make sure that we will meet those needs and then come up with that timeline. It can sound risky, and it is. But again, that's where any organization that chooses to work with another has to really feel confident and appreciate what each other brings to the table. It's about creating that trust and that relationship that comes with perhaps years of experience working together, perhaps with different organizations and their reputations. And it's not always the vendor that you have to worry about. We've also engaged with certain ministries of health where we had to walk away because we didn't necessarily believe that they would be able to give what they were committing to giving us. So there really does have to be trust between the two organizations before any kind of investment of time or ideas is given. Next slide, please. But then with those different ideas, when we're talking about the clinical requirements, the timeline, who are the decision makers, how is research and development still going to be involved as we grow with this new technology solution? How do you prioritize? Which one needs to come first? And there's no easy answer. There is no way to say that it will always be the clinical requirements first, and then the decision makers, and then the timeline. You never know. It's going to change between the different organizations that you might work with. So really comes down to, again, that relationship, the trust factor, and some of that comes from asking a lot of questions and listening to the answers, over communicating, really trying to analyze the different clinical workflows, what the different organizations consider to be risk. And I think at the end of the day, and I put it in the italics, is to use your intuition. One thing I think with clinical engineers is we've been exposed to so many different parts of the process that while we may not always be able to fully explain what it is or how we're applying that analysis, I think there is something in our gut that tells us what is going to work and what is not. And I would encourage you to trust that intuition. Next slide, please. And I would really encourage you, so with every solution, with every implementation, every new product, you are never done. You know, I used to say this in my previous work, there is no such thing as a project, it's a program. Any new technology that you implement becomes something that requires constant surveillance, constant monitoring. There will always be something that needs to be optimized. So I encourage you, whether you work in industry, the ministry, or in a hospital or somewhere else altogether, you must stay engaged and keep listening, keep asking questions, keep looking for ways to improve that current solution. Otherwise, you could be finding yourself with technologies that no longer meet that requirement. So I put down the Plan, Do, Study, Act. That is a methodology that we use quite often, and I would encourage you to look into it, or any other methodologies out there that require that kind of agile thinking. You're, again, always questioning, always looking for ways to improve. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to end the presentation. Again, I thank you for inviting me. And as I've only had about 10 minutes to speak with you today, please do feel free to reach out. I'm available on LinkedIn. And we can certainly have more of an engaging conversation about looking for ways to make sure a medical solution, whether it's Masimo or not, will be successful in your environment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for this very interesting presentation and for your encouragement for all of us.